No list of questions, huh? No
No.
prep, just all off the cuff?
Yeah. That's just whatever you want to talk about. Casey Hayward, welcome to the Pirate.
John, thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. So this project actually started out several months ago when I was doing them as interviews and then writing them down.
Yep.
And I interviewed you at Spurnack where we used to work together. And then I realized I'm really not getting the texture of this conversation.
That's fair. I didn't even know I was getting interviewed when we were talking.
Well, I didn't want to phrase it like that. I figured I'd like finish the article and then send it off to you. And I was like, wow, this is a really cursory summary of it.
Yeah.
And so after that, that's when I was like, how can I better grasp?
I figured this was going into like your novel that you're going to write, like stories from pilots in Alaska, aviating in Alaska. I figured that's what was going. I could see you writing a book in the future.
So I don't currently have that as the plan. I have been, as you know, writing my own stories and publishing those, and I'll kind of accumulate those into a book at some point.
Oh, yeah.
But why don't we start off with your qualifications?
Oh boy. So I guess it's always easier for me to go back chronologically. So back in 2010, I got my private pilot's license in Pullman, Washington. I was going down the path of becoming a commercial pilot. I took the instrument written and the commercial written, and ultimately ran out of money. So I did some of the training and kind of just that all fell by the wayside. And the reason being really back in the day, Horizon FOs, you needed to have like 2,000, 3,000 hours, and they were only making 29,000. I forget the exact number, but it was like the future was pretty grim.
Yeah.
From just really making it all work out. So graduated college and had a couple careers in between then and now, and bought an airplane, built some hours, finished up the instrument and commercial, and then came up here and started flying. So flew for Spurnack as a commercial pilot, fresh commercial pilot's license.
Yeah.
Starting out at instrument and commercial, really.
Yeah.
I think probably just a few prior months. Might have had my paper commercial cert when I applied to Spurnack, you know.
I love that.
But yeah, it was. Then I'm ATP rated, or have the ATP certificate with a Beech 1900 type rating. So it's kind of
so at ACE, they pay for your ATP as you go.
They do, yeah. So upgrade training for them consists of sending you to Dallas ATP CTP, get that class done, take your ATP written, and then they fly you up to Denver, just south of Denver. There's a simulator, a 1900D model simulator. I currently fly the C model 1900s at ACE, Alaska Central Express, ACE Air Cargo.
And so the difference there is steam versus glass, or
no? It's just the variant. So there's a A model, D model, C model, D model, and there's also an E model, I believe, which is the military variant, and they kind of jumbled things up with the serial numbers, so I might be getting that confused. But there's actually a military variant of the 1900, so it's the same airplane, just a different variant.
Gotcha.
But the type rating is good for all of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you went and did the simulator training.
Yep.
And got your ATP. Now, is that for the captain's qualification? Do you go in with just a commercial, right, and sit in the right seat with just a commercial?
Yep. Yeah. So currently where I work at ACE, start with a commercial and instrument qualifications, and then you sit in the right seat as SIC. It's a 2-pilot airplane. It's really a single pilot airplane, but long story short, it became a 2-pilot airplane, so it's actually a 2-pilot airplane. There's a couple captains that have been there for quite a while, and they actually have a single pilot type rating certificate. So on my certificate, the type rating says SIC required, so it's a two-pilot operation.
So what changed to make it 2-pilot? Was some accidents?
Yeah, I believe there's some accidents back in the early 90s. And from what I understand, you can, with that type rating and qualifications, you could get the 1900 type rating, and it also gave you the King Air 350 type rating, because the 1900 is essentially a stretched King Air. That's how it came out. But then back in the early 90s, the FAA kind of reviewed that and separated the type ratings out, and I don't know if it was at the same time where they made it a 2-pilot aircraft, but yeah, it's the workload kind of demands it. But all that to say, I stand corrected, because there are operators flying the 1900 single pilot.
All right.
So it's not really the FAA, but I think it's the type of operation. I'll have to dig into it on the reason behind it, but it's I mean, regardless, ACE has at the very most, a very least an approved SIC program, but I think it's a little bit more than that based on the type of operation that we conduct. So yeah, we start out there and then build up time. Your 1,500 hours at least to get your ATP, and then 500 hours in type. You don't really need that, but there's some behind the scenes regs that it makes sense if you actually have 500 hours in type. Otherwise, you have a limitation on your certificate. So then you're eligible for upgrade. Yeah. But it's really your reputation on the line that. And feedback from the captains, you as an FO being ready for upgrade.
So when you owned an airplane to build some time, and you started out, that was a 210, right?
It was an early model 210, 1962 Cessna 210B.
Yeah. So tell us about that.
Well, have some stories to go along with it. Was kind of in the black hole for renting airplanes where I lived in Central Washington. So it's like, well, it makes sense to buy an airplane, and really wanted the 182. I'm a bigger guy and had some friends that we like to adventure and go places. So 182 made sense. But at the time, the market for the 182s was way overpriced. So my buddy's like, hey, have you considered a 210? I was like, no, not really, like too much airplane. He's like, hey, check this one out. So it was an early model, priced right. Nice. It was so at the time I didn't know, but 1967 and prior, all the way to I think 1960, they started making the 210s to 1967. Still has the struts on them.
Oh, okay.
67 they went with the cantilever wings, took the struts off. So it was essentially a Cessna 205. It was the fuselage of a Cessna 205, and they just made it retractable. So it's really a retractable Cessna 205. It had a stole kit on it. And I didn't put that on, but it's kind of odd for a 210, but it was a pretty sweet airplane. So
did you use the stole kit?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, we took it. It had spring landing gear, or later model 210s has the tubular landing gear. So the spring landing gear. The only weak point is actually the gear actuators themselves on all Cessna retracts, really. But yeah, it was fun plane. Built a lot of time, and the reality of it is, I came up here with like 600 hours, and I built 200 series time, and handed my resume out everywhere around Merrill Field and wherever I could think my Army, even ACE at the time. And Spurnack, they fly 207. So it was kind of like, oh, you have 200 series time. And frankly, they didn't really care, but it's insurance. That's another topic to discuss.
Yeah.
Insurance really dictates a lot of time requirements. So I really checked that box for their insurance requirements by having that 200 series time. And so that was kind of a blessing in disguise that I got a 210, built 250 hours, I think, in that plane. And so that I really attributed that for going directly into a 207 and not having to spend time in a 172 or really going out to Bethel or something like that.
So when you came up here, when I first applied at Spurnack, I had 30 hours of Alaska time, which wasn't enough.
Right.
But I also only had 30 hours of 200 series time.
Yeah.
So did you have any Alaska time when you started, or was that 200 series enough?
I had a couple hours of Alaska time, and that was not enough. And essentially, I needed 50 hours, so I hopped in a 150.
Yeah.
And flew around for 50 hours. I think I hit 50 hours in a couple weeks. Just buzzing around, and it was good because it really did allow me to get used to the operations, especially in Merrill Field. So
Merrill Field has some of the more complicated VFR operations of any airport that I'm familiar with. They have visual and special VFR arrivals and departures from several different directions, and then Anchorage International it should by any definition be a Bravo, but it can't because it's one of 7 or 8 reasonably sized airports in Anchorage itself.
Right.
And so it's cut apart into a Charlie for International and a Delta for Merrill, which should be a Charlie. And then you have Elmendorf Air Force and Bryant Army airfields, and then Lake Hood Seaplane Base, which is the busiest seaplane base in the world. And then you have all the international arrivals, and as you exit Merrill in any direction, you're probably underflying something that weighs 100 times as much as you do.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it's quite a bit to fly just VFR. To just get 20 miles away from the airport is a lot of work.
Yeah, I know. Pilots that have been up here 10, 20 years, they have a lot of flying experience under their belt, and they fly out of Lake Hood, but they're scared of Merrill.
Yeah,
just because it's its own little world, right? Being the city airport and being the training airport.
Yeah.
But it's, I don't know. You can get used to anything.
Yeah.
It's and then once you do though, the controllers can kind of jive with you, and you can jive with them and really help them out. So
yeah,
nice.
That's one thing I notice here is that if you do your best to stay on the ball, then the controllers will remember you and they'll play ball with you.
Right.
Like when I'm coming into on an instrument clearance and I'm high and it's pretty busy at International, and you have to get into Merrill on an instrument clearance, they have to shut down 3 major airspaces for you.
Yeah.
And so every time, if it's plausible, I'll try to cancel early so that I can go visually and alleviate that responsibility for them. So they know that when I ask for an approach, I think I need it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
yeah, I was actually flying the other day and heard you on the radio, and I think you asked for some approach, and they said unable, right? You were trying to come in 16 or something like that.
I was trying to come in on the RNAV Alpha.
Okay.
And
I think Anchorage is probably taking off 3-3.
Yeah. And I was like, they were going to have to shut down their departure corridor for International. And so I didn't want to do that, but I was at 3,000 feet, still not breaking out. They were calling 2,500 or 3,000 at Merrill, but I've been in situations where you get in close and that's not the case, or it'll be that above the land,
right?
But it'll be 600 feet or 200 feet over the water.
Oh, yeah.
So you need to be on an approach.
Yeah.
And so I did ask him for an approach then, and he vectored me and gave me a descent so that I could to an area that he figured I could break out, and I ended up breaking out a couple hundred feet later.
Yeah, that was Napto. How do you spell Napto?
You heard me?
Oh yeah, I heard that. I was flying there. I was like, oh, that's John.
Yeah, I was like, man, I haven't heard of that one. Yeah,
it's funny, like all the different gates that they have that they use for the Anchorage area, but flying at Ace, we use those gates all the time, and it's Merrill. It's all the same, like you said. I mean, it really should be a Bravo airspace, and I mean, in some regards, we're lucky it isn't, because there's a lot more to deal with, a lot more surveillance.
Yeah.
But in some regards, it might be a good thing. We'll see what they're doing that runway at Elmendorf. I think they're repaving the whole runway there.
Yeah, and extending it, right?
I think extending it, yeah. And with that, there's supposed to be a review of the airspace if they haven't already done that. So
yeah, I heard they were working on that, or will be working on that. So, yeah. It's I don't see a great solution except expanding Anchorage across the inlet. There was that attempt to make the bridge several years ago, and that would open up the space needed to alleviate, because Anchorage is such a small, it's just a little point of land where half of all of Alaska is crammed into as far as population, and then you have all the airports jiving for priority, and it gets busy. Yeah,
there's a lot of water and flatland out there, but then you get to the airports, and then it's city and then mountains. So there's not really a lot of room to expand. So
you're talking about
airspace, but I mean I mean even the city in itself too. So
yeah. So you got the job at Ace back in June.
It would have been back in October 30th. I started ground school.
Okay.
A year ago, or last year. I went through ground school. They have a really awesome 2-week ground school. They really teach you everything you need to know about 135 flying, and also the 1900 systems and limitations. And it's not just sitting there in front of the PowerPoint or sitting through reading the POH. Really, really great ground school. They have a simulator. Simulators leave some to be desired, but I think they reached out to Redbird. Yeah, they reached out to Redbird and said, "Hey, can you build us a 1900 C simulator?" And I said, "Well, we haven't done one, but you'll be the first." And so they did.
Nice.
And it's a procedures trainer. And I mean, it's not full motion. It's static, but it does the job. But then you get in the airplane, and they do a handful of training sessions with you, and then give you the check ride. And Ace is really unique because they I went over there with 1,500 hours, and it was 1,500 hours of single pilot, single engine VFR flying. So I didn't really have a lot of instrument flying. I think I had actually 0.3 actual
really?
and a bunch under the hood, So instrument flying was really new to me. Turbines was new to me going to Ace. But I would give it a pretty high rating for their training program and the training department. And they're constantly trying to make things better along the way as well. So, and it consists of line pilots that become standards captains, that become instructors, and then even check airmen as well. Nice. So there's room to grow even beyond my role as a captain at Ace right now, if you so desire. But if some guys and gals, they just prefer to be a captain and go that route until they build enough time to go to the airlines. And it's really crazy too. It's really a pipeline to a 747. You go from a 1900 to a 747. That's
Really?
yeah, the Atlas or Coletta, UPS, even Alaska Airlines, Delta, United, you name it. I mean, it's really seems like the flying that we do at ACE really is favored by a lot of future employers.
Because your ACE seems to be essentially like a mini 121 operation.
I would say, yeah. Yeah, we have roughly 20 birds. I think we have just a couple over 20, 21, 22. We're trying to get one online, I think. But yeah, it really does seem like we operate as a little mini 21. And I would say we're the regional cargo airline of South Central Alaska.
Yeah.
And we service Southeast Alaska as well as down the chain all the way to Dutch Harbor. So we cover a lot of ground. Definitely.
And so for the most part, you guys are, with just a few exceptions, you operate IFR, right?
Yeah, we absolutely. Yeah, we're very well IFR equipped. That plane is pretty sick.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun.
Well, tell us about that.
Yeah, it's got PT 65s on it. So PT 6A, 65B, testing me. So it's 1100 horsepower, 1174 shaft horsepower per engine. So it has a lot of performance, especially when you're empty or have very little cargo in the back. I was actually just flying, did an Anchorage Dillingham turn earlier today, and climbing out of Dillingham at 3,000 feet per minute and just pegged the VSI, and it's pretty cool. And very capable platform. Half of our birds are still steam gauge, all hand flown. The other half is glass Garmin package with an autopilot as well. So nice. It's your lucky day if you get glass.
Yeah.
But so yeah, I mean you're hand flying in the flight levels all the way, which is crazy, but
yeah,
it definitely makes you a better pilot.
Yeah.
That. So
I had to do some hand flying the other day, and I was like, "Ooh, I don't get paid enough for that."
Oh yeah. As a FO starting out, and you're deviating here or there. You're within limits, but your captain's really challenging you to say, well, if you can hold flight level 211, right, and you can hold 210. If you can hold 100 feet off, you can hold the actual altitude. So
right.
And yeah, it's just it's a pilot's airplane. It's a really capable platform. The bird I was in today, I think, is the highest time 1900 C model out there. Is 90,000 plus hours on it. So yeah, and it's one of the better birds, right? It's just it's finally broken in. I would say. So yeah, it's
wild.
It's wild, yeah. And there's not a lot of other airframes out there that we can think about replacing it. There's stuff out there, but just the range, the fuel, the cargo capacity, it's really the prime bird for the type of flying we're doing. So
and it has pretty reasonable short field.
It does. Yeah, I mean, with the right wind conditions. Taken off. I've personally taken off in 2,000. I mean, your wheels up 2,000 feet down the runway, and it's got fall reverse, of course, and the brakes on it are do some good as well. So I mean, yeah, you can easily land that thing at 1,000 feet.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now that reverse
with the right wind conditions.
That reverse really helps with the icy runways.
It does, yeah. Yeah, you don't have to touch the brakes, which is really nice. You definitely got to be careful that both reversers engage at the same time.
A little.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I've heard stories of that happening in the past, and one fully engages and the other one doesn't, and it's a trip towards the runway lights anyway. So
yeah.
You gotta. I mean, it demands respect like any other airplane, but all that to say, it is a fairly forgiving aircraft.
Yeah. So what are you doing trued out up in the flight levels?
Probably I would say 250.
Nice.
Yeah, true airspeed.
So you're getting some stuff done.
Oh yeah. We cover a lot of ground pretty quick. So yeah,
So you did all of your flying in the States until you moved up here.
Yeah.
What were the biggest differences that you noticed coming from? It was Washington, right?
Yeah, but primarily the Pacific Northwest. Did flight training in Pullman, Washington. Flew a lot in Idaho, which is where I hail from.
Yeah.
And then Central Washington, out towards the Puget Sound.
Yeah.
Did a lot of San Juan Island flying, which that's really nice flying. Highly recommend.
Yeah.
Just bopping around down there. Did some airplane camping over there. But yeah, even flying down the Washington, Oregon coast, and I mean, while we're on the subject, we're bragging, right? Telling those lies. With that 210, it was me and my buddy hopped in it. 2 full-size mountain bikes, camping gear, grossed out. It was still able to take full fuel, which was amazing.
No way.
So totally grossed out in that 210, and we basically pointed south. We stopped in Oregon, did some bike riding. I didn't forget it. I mean, I guess I did, but my front through axle was still in the car. So I had the axle, because that would have been a bad thing. I had the axle, the nut fell off in my car. So we walked like 2 miles to the hardware store, and I found a nut and a tap and die set, and I was able to, because it's all metric threads, super uncommon to find.
Yeah.
Axle nut at a hardware store. I made my own, and it lasted the entire trip, so I was pretty thankful for that. But Oregon did that, and then down to Reno, and rented a car and did a bunch of stuff down there. So that was a lot of fun. But yeah, that just building time, and I know a lot of pilots don't have that opportunity to do those things, but even renting a plane and really going on a cross country, you learn a lot, you get a lot of experience, you get a lot more confidence in your abilities as well. And even now, I mean, I still jones to go do that, and looking forward to getting an airplane up here, because there's a lot of opportunities where you need an airplane to go experience it. So.
Oh yeah, especially up here.
Yeah, but anyway. Yeah, most of my time, 650 hours down there. And then I came up here. I went up to Blue River. Shout out to Blue River up in Palmer. It's a great outfit, great place to learn how to fly. And that's one thing to consider too, is coming up here. And like we were talking about earlier, Alaska time is really needed, especially by the insurance requirements for a lot of these smaller outfits. So they'll ask you, how much Alaska time do you have? And it's kind of a rite of passage. And also it really does make a difference. I mean, the unique, I know, listening to some of the guests you've had in the past, talking, Alaska is so unique in so many different ways. But it's one opportunity to come up here and bust out your instrument or your commercial rating or some of your advanced ratings and really get a taste of it. There's a lot of great flight schools up here. But yeah, anyway, came up here and handed out a bunch of resumes. I was ready to quit my job down there, and I was like, well, I'm just gonna go rent a 172 with an instructor, and we flew up the Colony Glacier all the way to the top. You could see
Prince William?
The sound, Prince William Sound on the other side. So that was fortunate enough, clearing $1 million day to do that. So let's go. This guy's been burning holes in the sky with some students, and I was like, hey, you want to go do something fun? Let's go up the glacier. So, that was my only Alaska time I had, and flew back down, put in my 2-week notice on my job, and packed a U-Haul and started driving with no job coming up here. And halfway up the Alcan, Mike Spurnack Airways called, and hey, got your resume here. Are you interested? And they're like, yeah, I'll be there in 3 days. I'll just unpack the U-Haul first and settle in and then come back. And so and then kind of the rest is history. And I was there for about a year and a half, I think, flying the sleds for Spurneck Airways, and was able to help out in the shop.
Yeah.
Wrenching on planes. I'm doing on-the-job training towards my A&P, probably 80% of the way to that. So, and I'm even working at ACE. I'm helping out on the flying side on my days off when they need help at Spurneck, and also helping them out in the shop. So that's one piece of advice definitely is don't burn any bridges.
No.
It's a really small world.
Oh yeah.
Was actually one of the rampers that I worked with. I don't know if you met him, but one of the rampers at Spurneck became a pilot, and he's flying for Ute.
Oh, nice.
And he's looking to move on to the next thing, and got a phone call from an outfit looking for a recommendation. So you never know where those dividends are going to pay off in the future.
Yeah.
So,
and just showing up with a good attitude, whether you're on the ramp or you're in the shop or you're looking for a job, like whatever it is, like go just a little bit further and people will remember that. Absolutely.
Yeah. What value can you provide? Sure. Yeah. We're all pilots, but a lot of these outfits where you start out in Alaska, they're small outfits, and there's a bunch of overhead in aviation, as we all know through flight training, and that really doesn't change for operators as well. And sometimes it's even, they got building costs to pay, utilities to pay, employees to pay, airplanes, insurance is a huge cost. And so, what are some of those ways that you can provide value outside of just being a pilot?
Yeah. And the whole reputation thing, that especially here in Alaska, I don't know what it's like in the States or in the 121 world, but here in Alaska, like when I went to apply for Lake Clark, where I work now, I handed the chief pilot my resume, and he goes, "Yeah, I know who you are."
Yeah.
And
you never met him before?
I'd never seen him before in my life, and he was like, he'd heard of different places that I worked, and my reputation, and so I ended up getting the job because of that. And it's like, well, there were several times that jobs that I've had where I've wanted to, like storm out and quit and be like, I'm so sick of like it. It makes everything easier for everybody if you're just, a decent human being, and then your life will work out a lot better.
It'll all fall into place, right?
Yeah.
And there's I was talking to the DO at ACE. I was like, "Hey, I'm going to do an interview, and is that okay?" He's like, "Yeah, absolutely." And he had a different perspective on this interview, right? And talking about it, and he's like, there's good things and there's bad things to say, and address all of them, because there's always something to complain about, right? But it's how you perceive it and how you react to it. There's undesirable parts, like some of your previous guests, like you're getting unpaid to unload, and you're and it's the same at ACE. But you know what? It's the compensation's well for the flying that we do, and there's a lot of other fringe benefits along the way.
Absolutely.
So absolutely. There's always something. There's always the undesirable aspect, but it's in some ways, if you can handle it, and so it's not for everyone.
No,
that's the moral of the story. If somebody's really looking to come up here, you really have to embrace the culture and of Alaska, the unique. I think this is written in our SOPs at ACE. Something along the lines of how do you dress for work, right? How do you dress for work? And it's Alaska is as unique as the people it has dress appropriately.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it was a really interesting way to, the climate. It's still a job where I can show up in Carhartts and a hoodie.
Yeah.
And in some aspects, it'll be, we go to Kodiak and it's 40 degrees and raining out. And then we come back to Anchorage and it's, what is it, 20 degrees outside and blue sky. So you go from those temperature extremes and you're outside handling boxes, moving it around. So you have to be prepared for everything. I got a rain jacket in my pilot bag. I got a puffy, and I got a overnight kit just in case if I get stuck somewhere. So you definitely got to be prepared up here for any situation, really. But
so let's talk about your flight bag. What all have you pulled out of it since you came up from the States? What have you added? What's used? I find it super beneficial to audit my bag maybe once every month or two. Make sure that I've got the seasonally appropriate stuff. Make sure I've got all my emergency calories that I keep sealed, and unless I'm not going to be able to eat a whole meal or something like that. Yeah. So
it's funny because I think when I started flying, even before 135, I like to be prepared, and the good old Boy Scout motto. I basically took all of the Alaska minimum equipment list and had that in my flight bag. So like the fishing kit, the axe, I found these little calorie tabs, like high calorie tablets, and so they basically really condense, but it's 7 days worth of food for a couple people.
Nice.
But do I have that in my flight bag now? Absolutely not.
No.
If I go flying, if you and I went flying in the backcountry, would I grab that bag? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But the commercial flying I do now, it's really down to the basics, A good multi-tool always comes in handy. The jackets, like we previously talked about, so raincoat, puffy. I just thought of something that's actually in my flight bag. It's kind of funny stories involved, but we'll save that to the end. Some survival food. Being a captain now, there's some extra paperwork that I bring along, just in case. That if I need that. It's really dwindled down to, and of course the overnight kit. So toothbrush, toothpaste, deodorant, extra change of underwear. You never know when you're going to get stuck somewhere. So I would say my flight bag's definitely a lot more low key than when I first started out. But back to the funny side. So the 1900 is there's no toilet on board. So everyone's got to go to the bathroom, right? There's a fine line when you're in the flight levels. Easier to get dehydrated, right?
Oh yeah.
So there's a fine line between drinking water and drinking water where you have to pee. Yeah. So there's gel bags. And that's a nice part about a 2-pilot crew. Somebody could just take a step in the back and do their business. And so we have gel bags, but a lot of guys prefer water bottles. Yeah. So it's like, man, I prefer analogy at least. I'm not saying anything about myself, but just so I wouldn't miss. I feel like my aim is not that good, but
the margin for error.
The margin for error is a lot bigger. Well, a funny story about that. One of the guys at Ace actually peed in an Nalgene and forgot it in the airplane. It's like we're good about disposing it, but went back and it was gone. Like somebody took it, and the like the next day saw somebody with his Nalgene, well, joke's on you. It was full of this. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, dude.
So he's like, oh, let's, your loss is my gain for the humor of that, like,
Dude,
oh,
that's worth $8.99 or whatever.
oh yeah, 100%, yeah, worth the price of admission.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you got to go number 2 sometimes unexpectedly. So that's actually one of the kits. My girlfriend is a rock climber, and have you ever heard of poop bags?
Oh yeah.
So Glacier Travel, and it's just a plastic bag that's got some kitty litter in it or whatever. And so actually that's part of my flight kit now too. Yeah. Just in case. I've never had to do it, but I've heard stories of it. And somebody went in their little lunchbox.
Oh, I heard about that.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. What a bad day, dude.
Yeah.
What a bad day to fly.
And she was a female pilot too.
Oh, yeah. I remember now.
Yeah.
Oh.
But you gotta go, right?
Yeah, dude.
There's somebody that, we carry around boxes and really had to go and didn't have anything. So, found an empty box, put it that way, and went in the box. Yeah.
Oh my God.
I mean, it's like just that was years and years ago, but so being prepared is a good thing, right?
Yeah,
put yourself in that situation. So
prepared for the mission.
Prepared for the mission.
Whether that's 4 hours aloft in the flight levels without access to a restroom, or
plan accordingly, or even an hour flight, you never know.
Yeah, that's true. That is true, man. I worked for Grant starting out in Alaska, and I was sitting in the pilot lounge one day, and one of my coworkers comes through after a flight, and it's like 10 o'clock in the morning. We'd all just gotten there. He was one of the first ones out. He comes back through, and he's like, I'm done for the day. I was like, what happened? He was on a 15-minute flight, and one of his passengers stood up, took off her hoodie, pooped in it.
Oh no.
And this isn't a 207. This is in the Ford Explorer of airplanes. And she just had to sit there. I felt super bad for her, but I mean, like, all those passengers. Yeah. It was a rough situation, dude.
Yeah.
So the preparedness. But
I mean, you can't necessarily prepare for your passengers either.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although I do, with Blake Clark, I do now carry individually wrapped Tums and extra puke bags.
Nice.
Because we, coming through those passes, a lot of times we're low level, a lot of times we're flying passengers from the States, and they're just not used to, the Navajo handles turbulence fairly well, but it's not a 7.3. It's not just going to vibrate a little bit and shake your wine glass. It's you're going to get rocked a little bit, and if you're in there and you're making turns through a canyon and it's your first time being on something so small, and you're also trying to take pictures out of the side of the airplane, it's a recipe for.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it would be a lot worse if it was hotter up here too.
Yeah.
I remember I took a buddy flying, and it was 95 degrees out, and we were 3,000 feet at AGL, and it was still 95 degrees out, just hot and sweaty. And I was actually doing a training flight, I think instrument flight or something like that, and wasn't that good yet, so kind of this way and that way, like, all right, let's do a steep turn, and he's in the back just like, oh no. So yeah, there's kind of a lesson learned there, like, all right, maybe not take your good buddy. And it was 21st birthday. I was like, wanted to like, hey man, I'll take you for a flight, you want to come along? Surprise. Made him sick before he even went out on his 21st birthday.
Perfect. Probably saved him a hangover the next day.
Yeah, I think so. I did. Yeah. Just get it out of his system early on, right?
Perfect. So you mentioned that you have some stories from flying the 210. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, the 210. Well, when I first bought it, it sat around on the ramp in California and we were draining the fuel, and there was some water in the fuel. and had the Cessna death caps in there.
Death caps.
It's the Cessna death caps from the factory. There's water that can, if the seals are bad, they'll get in there. So, but we sumped till we saw no more water. It's like we're all trained for. And the one mistake we made is not. I do remember rocking the wings, but we didn't rock them enough, and we definitely didn't push down on the tail. So there's wrinkles in the bladders of those Cessnas, and water gets trapped. And so we thought we were good. And my buddy and I, who's a CFI, we went out, and he's like, all right, let's go do a stall. So mixture rich, do everything for a stall, enter the stall, and just like 30 minutes in this brand new airplane flying it, and the engine's starting to sputter, And so we pitch it over, and basically there's somewhat of a field in front of us, and it's kind of mountainous with trees, and we're like, well, we're going there. And for whatever reason, he's sitting in the left seat for insurance purposes, and I'm sitting in the right seat, and I just leaned it out a little bit, and between leaning it out and I think pitching it forward, kind of moving that water around in the tanks, it was enough to get full steam out of the engine. So, I mean, it was probably only 5 seconds, but it felt like 60 seconds, It's like, got to deal with all this. So, came back, sumped a lot more water out. So, lesson learned there. And took off, and we made it from just outside of Sacramento, Placerville, all on the same day. So it was already a pretty long day. This is July 3rd, and we landed in Klamath Falls, Oregon, and we were just going to get gas and keep going back up to Pullman and put the landing gear down. And the gear's down, but we have a red light. It's a green light or red light. And luckily I had mirrors so I could see what was going on. So all the gear was extended. We could even feel it clunk, but it's still not really an indication that it's down and locked. But the gear doors were still out, and they should have been retracted. So declared an emergency, got the fire trucks on the runway. Didn't know if the gear was going to collapse. Again, This was like the second or third landing of that plane.
Yeah.
And had another buddy in the back of the plane. We circled around. We were pretty low on fuel already. We didn't feel like we had to burn fuel, but we went through all the emergency procedures in the POH. And long story short, it's to leave the engine at 1,000 RPMs, have somebody get out of the airplane and push down on the tail for fear of the nose gear to collapse, because it's all hydraulically actuated. Engine-driven hydraulics. So if you keep the engine revved up, if there's anything going on with the hydraulic pump, 1,000 RPMs is enough to really keep that hydraulic pressure going.
Interesting.
Yeah, to keep things extended if they're not locked. So left the engine running. He got on the back, pushed down on the tail, was able to shut it down, and then slowly let it off, and everything held. But it was just a couple electrical wires that broke loose off of a terminal that didn't allow the gear doors to sequence. So, and then we tried to start it up, didn't start up because the boost pumps were also on that terminal. So didn't know it at the time, but so we had to wait for a tow. July 3rd, got the last motel room in Klamath Falls. It was a good experience though, but we got it fixed on July 4th. There was a mechanic that came out and really hooked us up, and
No way.
we were home by July 4th. So
Nice.
yeah, it all worked out.
So what do you do now as far as fuel contamination? Do you have, besides you were talking about rocking the wings a little more and shaking the tail if you suspect that it's got a large amount of contamination, do you have any additional procedures?
Well, I didn't learn my lesson.
No?
Also happened again. There was a plane that was sitting for 7 years, and we did a thorough inspection and an annual on the ramp up in Talkeetna, and we pushed down on the tail, rocked the wings, let everything settle out. And I would say that's probably the additional things is after you rock the wings, drain fuel, let it settle out, do it again, drain fuel, push down on the tail, drain fuel, make sure there's no water in there. The collectors as well, the header tanks. We did all that. So I did all those extra steps because I've had that experience in the past. But rotation, it had the engine sputter on me, and I just rotated, just that high angle attack with there was still water in there somewhere, and picked up in the collector, and engine sputtered enough for like, I don't like this, and had plenty of runway and was able to land, and taxied off the runway and rocked the wings, and kind of did that process again. So I'm not sure what happened on that one, because I really sincerely thought we were a lot more diligent, but airplanes are always trying to kill you. There's always there's always that balance, right? And it's you do everything to mitigate it, but you also do everything you can to react to the situation. I don't know what I would have done differently. I guess probably just keep draining till. I mean, you rock the wings and push the tail down, and you try to get all that stuff to the back. And we looked inside the tanks as well, and it looked, there was no indications. And because it doesn't take all this to say, in these two experiences, it doesn't take a lot of water. It really doesn't. Just a few teaspoons of water can really affect the engine performance. So
especially because it usually does happen on those changes of pitch, right, where you're at a higher power setting. You're doing something where it's not like you're in cruise at 3,500 and you've got
it's probably not water in the fuel. There's probably something else going on.
Yeah, exactly. So so it sounds like, though, you were at least prepared with the emergency procedures and the aeronautical decision making ahead of time, with like, I've got enough runway. This is not something I'm going to think about. I'm going to land. Oh, hey, there's a field in front of me. I'm going to go ahead and go for that.
Absolutely. Just like the first story in the 210, we made sure that we had enough altitude and we were over a field. The second one, definitely a plane that hadn't flown in 7 years, was very mentally prepared to, if I don't like something, I'm going to be quicker to abort than I might try to troubleshoot or verify, especially a plane that you haven't flown or really seen before. So, it's taking the time to come up with a game plan, and a lot of even working at ACE has really taught me that, is being patient, slowing down. There's no reason to be in a hurry, and instrument flying, briefing everything you're going to do every step of the way, while you're still up in the flight levels. So, and it's especially, it's interesting. Have you had two pilot crew?
I've got like 30 hours.
The CRM, we're taught it, we hear about it, we learn about it, but until you're actually doing it, to really get it down to a science, and side note, everyone's different. Everyone has different backgrounds and different personalities, and even if you're within the SOP, there's still gray area there in the SOP, and that's by design as well, to let pilots be pilots and make those decisions. But you just want to make sure that as a two-pilot crew, you're both on the same sheet of music all the way, the whole profile, descent profile, into landing and taking off as well. So, it's been a fun ride going from single engine, single pilot, VFR flying to two-pilot crew. So, I kind of miss being single pilot, but but it's a good challenge.
So you're talking about, like, basically, you're, to the extent possible, you're making those decisions ahead of time, like, especially with the larger aircraft. You have your stop, go, your V1 cut and
Yeah.
stop
Yep.
and go distance.
Stop, go.
Yeah.
So all our V speeds, we operate in a balanced field. So we have V1 speeds that are posted and briefed. So if we have a problem prior to V1, we're going to reject on the ground. But at V1 or after V1, if we have, there's all kinds of Christmas lights on that airplane, so flashers, and so if the system senses a problem, and unless it's briefed, we're gonna react accordingly to whatever was briefed. Either we're gonna go or we're gonna stop, but typically we're gonna stop if we can.
Right.
If not, we're gonna continue there and accomplish the memory items and go through the QH and the normal checklists at the appropriate time as well. So,
have you had any issues in the 1900?
I've heard of my colleagues have definitely dealt with things. I haven't truly had any in-flight emergencies. I've had bleed air issues that we're able to isolate and then return back to Anchorage. We're, I think, coming from Juneau to Anchorage when that happened, and we got the red light, and so we went through all the procedures, and we have 2 bleed air, so 1 inoperable. It's okay to continue as long as you can maintain your pressurization. So, the rest of the system worked okay. Followed all the procedures and returned to Anchorage for it to get fixed. So, that's a pretty benign issue, to be frank. But we're well trained on engine failures, and I will say at ACE there's been engine failures in flight before, precautionary shutdowns, diversions, things like that. So you're trained to deal with it. So fortunately, I haven't had to deal with that. I got stuck in King Salmon the other day. We landed there and we actually diverted. We were on our way to Dillingham, diverted to King Salmon because Dillingham fogged in. And so we made the decision to divert to King Salmon and shut everything down. We were hanging out in the little FBO there, and we're like, well, let's go get some more fuel. So we got out to the airplane and opened the door. I'm like, man, it's a lot closer to the ground than it normally is. And I looked at the nose strut and it was just completely flat. So had to call our dispatch, and there was another cargo plane coming out, and so they put a mechanic and the tools required to fix it on the plane, and they were able to fix the problem and get the air in the nose strut, and it was all good to go. So I've had flaps stuck in the up position before as well. So I've definitely had a handful of things to deal with, but really no fun stories like yours. Well, another time.
Yeah, that'll be for once the investigation's done.
Yeah.
So with the smaller issues, one thing that I, as a company trainer over at Lake Clark, one thing that I've noticed with pilots coming in is that if there's a small issue like the bleed air you were talking about, or like gear, which is I say small issue simply because it's not immediately life-threatening.
Right.
I see pilots react very quickly when they first start out to those things. They want to get through. They want to treat a checklist like a memory item, or a memory checklist, and it's a lot of times you just need to take a step back from that situation, like you were talking about, like give yourself some some time.
Mhm.
And so one of the things that I'll do is I love the bonanzas for this because I can reach over and I can pop the landing gear circuit breaker without them seeing it. I can just kind of reach and grab it.
Yeah.
And I'll do that just before the perch in the pattern so that like it's relatively busy airspace, stuff's going on. They're working with a plane that's probably faster than what they're used to and definitely has a lot more going on than the 172s that they were flying at school. And pull that, and then they go to swing the gear and they'll notice, hey, most of the time, hey, gear's not down. The items are no, the first item is get the fuck away from the airport. Like get some altitude, get alone in the sky, and go deal with it somewhere else.
Yeah. Aviate, navigate, communicate, right? I mean, that's say it, you hear it, but it's definitely I agree with everything you're saying. One of my sim instructor, who happened to be our flight instructor at ACE, in the airplane as we were learning, he had an engine failure. And so it was the FO's leg at the time. And so he described it. He's like, I have my seat back, I'm eating my salad, and red lights start going off. The right engine, or whichever engine, I think it was the right engine, started rolling back. So started having these issues, and they're in the cruise levels, and this airplane can perform. It can pretty much maintain altitude on a single engine, moderately loaded in the flight levels.
Wow.
So the service, it's service ceiling, single engine service ceiling is pretty high on it. So it doesn't require a lot of drift down, which is pretty cool. But anyway, back to the story. Right engine's rolling back. He's like, grabbed his salad dressing. He put the lid on it, put it in his lunchbox. He put the lid on his salad, put the salad back in his lunchbox. He pulled the seat forward. Hand me the QRH, continue to fly, right? And so there's no reason to be in a hurry. Losing an engine, it's a big deal. In certain situations, it's a bigger deal than if you're in cruise. So they ran through the memory items, backed it up with the QRH, the quick reference handbook. Part of that is communicating with ATC and vectored to land wherever they're doing. But the moral of the story is, even in emergency type situations, it's okay to slow down. But the flip side of that, sometimes there is a need to react quickly.
Yeah. So it definitely does pay to be on top of your procedures and to know the memory items and to be able to just knock them out in your sleep.
Absolutely. And at ACE, we address them every 6 months. So we have a 6-month check ride for glass, and the way it all works out, essentially we review all those things with a instructor, a check airman every 6 months. So that's a long time to not be using those memory items. So a good rule of thumb is to open the books and review those things monthly, or even beyond that, weekly, depending, especially if you're first starting out. That FO I flew with today, 120 hours in the airplane, so relatively new. I think moderate hours, close to 1,000 hours or so, but new to that airplane. And so we were in cruise, and I turned off the lights. All right, what are the memory items? Like reset the gen. Oh, there's one more step. Emergency lights. So it's just good to, when you can help people practically understand those things, rather than just have that rote memorization. I struggle with the rote memorization, so I'm the hands-on kind of guy that it helps me be in those situations and I can really learn from them. So
That's the practicing them in flight. That's one thing I really loved about Spurnack is that, you know, once in a while we'd get an empty leg, and when I had an empty leg and it wasn't busy out there, now, you know, middle of the summer, there are float planes all over the place. But, you know, I on my way back, I'd do a stall, or I'd do a steep turn, or, you know, I'd go through one of the emergency procedures. And you were talking about the sims too, that they mostly help with the procedures. And that's one thing that I bought when I first started flight training was a decent sim, and I've kept it up and upgraded it about once a year since, and that's been one of the better things for procedural training for me, because it doesn't help with airmanship whatsoever, unless it's a full motion sim, you know, like one of the Boeing ones, something like that. It's not going to help you land an airplane. It's not going to help your steep turns,
right.
But it absolutely will help you work through, okay, I'm in cruise, I'm 40 miles out, but I'm super high. I need to start working on getting down. I need to start briefing my approach, my arrival, if that's applicable. I need to start working through these steps. And then also with the multi-engine, I did a ton of sim work before I started multi-engine, because a lot of that's procedural. It's not really airmanship stuff. You've got one spot landing, I think, in multi-engine, something like that.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, one spot landing.
And the rest of it's procedural. And so I went on to, I think it was X-Plane, and I bought the airplane that I'd be flying, and I flew all the procedures over and over again, and I knocked the rating out really quick because of that.
Yep.
It saved quite a bit of money for me.
Yep. Yeah, I'm a huge, I was a flight sim nerd before I got my pilot's license. And, I kind of fell out of it once I got into my pilot's license. I was in college doing other things in college. So, but yeah, I'm an advocate of the flight simulator as well. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I was naive, like, oh yeah, I can land a plane, but there's a lot more to it than that. So the descent planning, it still really doesn't teach you ADM though, and on decision making. No. But and that's a huge takeaway, and especially flying in Alaska, you know, kind of coming full circle with everything. Mm-hmm. You really do have to have good ADM up here to survive. And one of those ways, kind of shifting topics, is listening to others and the wisdom that they have. You know, Craig, our chief pilot at Spurnack, has a lot of real world experience, thousands of hours in a 207 mm-hmm. out in Bethel, and other airframes as well. And he's got a lot of stories, and you know, he tells them they're just fun stories, but there's always a takeaway, especially for you and I that are pretty new to that industry. So, and there's a lot more guys and gals that, you know, if you just take the time to listen and really take something away with everything they're saying, right, wrong, or indifferent, you know, maybe it was a good decision, maybe it was a bad decision, maybe it was a really screwed up situation that they had very little to go on, and they chose to make a decision, and they should have made the other decision. But mm-hmm. Every little bit of that really adds to the arsenal, because you might find yourself in that situation.
Absolutely. So, I mean, the amount of luck it takes to make all of your own bad decisions and live through it is enough. Like you got to learn from other people's bad decisions. Like, you start out with the best visualization I've heard. I think it was in Fate is the Hunter.
Yep.
You start out with a luck bag that's full and an experience bag that's empty, and every time you come through some shit, you take a little bit out of your luck bag and you put it in your experience bag, and you don't know how big your luck bag is.
Exactly. Yeah, and you don't know when it's going to run out.
Yeah. And so if you can pull experience, and like, this is one thing that really started to get me with rock climbing, is that back when I started rock climbing, it was at the very end of what would be the traditional way of going about it, which was the apprenticeship style of learning, because it's so massively complex to especially trad climb.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're going out there and you're making decisions on rock, on equipment placement, on the equipment to carry. Carrying too much equipment can exhaust you and become dangerous. Carrying too little equipment is obviously dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And I got in right at the end of that that apprenticeship style, and I spent a fair few years just following somebody who knew what he was doing. And then after that, it became, and I hate to point to the boogeyman of social media, but there are how-to videos online which are fantastically helpful.
Yeah.
But they don't give you that depth and texture that going out with somebody, that talking to somebody who knows what's going on, who knows that, yeah, that's a great idea, except, or, like, here's what happened when my buddy tried it. That's how Fred died in 1990.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that kind of aviation has become really approachable with social media and people learning that, hey, you can get out there and you can go to ATP, you can go to these flow-through schools, but there's still a lot of value packed into just sitting around the hangar like we used to at Spurneck, and that made that job just incredible. We were a scheduled operator. We had like 30 minutes in between flights, 45 minutes in between flights.
Hour and a half sometimes. Yeah.
Exactly. And so we'd just be hanging out.
Yeah.
And talking. And at first I didn't get it. At first I would go.
It's kind of frustrating, right?
It is.
Yeah.
And I'd like try to go.
I'm here to fly. Why aren't I flying?
Yeah. But then you realize that, hey, I can go talk to the A&Ps who have a lot to offer, and they can be showing me stuff. Like, I can give them a hand.
Yeah, cowling's off.
Yeah,
exactly. You can see into the engine. Yeah,
you can see how these systems work rather than the abstract diagrams that are so frustrating for me personally. When I look at a fuel diagram, it's like, man. But then when I see it in real life, it's like, oh, okay, I see why you have the different pumps and the different the sumps in 7 different places.
There's a reason why, right? Like, why do I have to go under the belly and sump these 2 things? Like, it. Yeah. Got the cough. Yeah, taking the hands-on approach and to things. I think, I mean, that's what being a pilot's about, is taking the hands-on approach and really understanding the systems. So, but there, on the flip side, I'm more of a hands-on learner, and I think there's a lot of individuals out there that are the book learners as well, and they're successful. So I think it's how do you adopt your learning style to be successful what you're doing, and kind of and you really got to fend for yourself. In my experience, of being a hands-on learner, I really had to, like, hey, can I go in the shop and is there a cowling open? Can I go take a look at something? Or but because it's not it's not always offered to you.
Yeah.
So,
but if you go after it, dude, that's one thing I love about aviation, is that if you're a little bit excited about it and you go and you start talking to people, dude, they're excited about it.
Yeah, everyone. Yeah,
They want to talk about airplanes too. So
Absolutely.
go in and ask. Yeah. Like, go in and say, like, hey, what's going on here? Tell me about this airplane. Where'd you fly today? People are psyched.
Absolutely.
To talk about it.
You know who's not psyched? My girlfriend. I'll social gathering with a bunch of pilots. It was like,
Yeah.
calm down on the pilot stories. Like, okay, honey, that's all right. Like, we don't need to talk about airplanes. Like, we won't talk about it. What happens? We talk about airplanes. You know, like, oh yeah,
percent.
you just can't get away from it. You like try and yeah.
That's what that's what this is for.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Get it out of everyone's system. So
hell yeah.
but
Casey Hayward,
John,
thanks for coming on the podcast.
yeah, you're welcome. Finally talked me into it. So
Yeah, dude.
appreciate it.
Have you on again here.
Yeah, absolutely.